What is up, guys? Today you're gonna learn to crush innocent boot pushers who dare to challenge you with a queen's pawn move with a simple and aggressive system called the Dutch defense. It is called a defense, but we're gonna be very aggressive here. And here's the thing, I recorded a video about this system some time ago, and you guys keep telling me that you are crushing with it, but you also have some questions, all right? And I'm gonna address those questions today. Now, if we look at the stats, most of your opponents will play c4, the main line of the Queen's Gambit, makes sense. And of course, some people will play knight f3 and bishop f4, the London system stuff. You know, some people will play that no matter what. Even if you started with the first move a5, nuclear winter, zombie apocalypse, some people will always stick to their London system, and I've got something really nasty against them. You're gonna love that. Alright, let's follow the main line, c4, and then they develop their knight, which is good for you because it allows you to execute your main plan, bishop to b4. You're pinning this knight, and in the future, you don't mind trading it off. We'll see why in a second. They'll play whatever. Again, the beauty of what you're playing is that it is a system. You'll put it out basically regardless of your opponent's moves. Very often they'll play something like bishop d2 or queen c2 to avoid doubling pawns after an exchange on c3, and then you play knight f6. They may also play a3, trying to get rid of your active bishop, but in fact, once again, they're unaware of your plan, and therefore they're only helping you to execute it. You trade off on c3, that's fine, part of your plan. The thing is, that knight no longer guards the square e4, which is good for you because at some point you're going to land your own knight there, and it's going to be a part of your attack. Now, at some point you'll need to develop your light square bishop. It's pretty clear that it is obstructed along this diagonal, and therefore you're going to play b6 and develop it right here to this really long, juicy diagonal where you control the center, but also take aim at his future castle, which is going to help you to attack there down the line in the middle game. Now, they develop their pieces somehow, you castle, and then at some point you land your knight on this great square e4. And this is a moment where you can already be reasonably happy. Once you got your octopus right here, controlling all these squares and messing up all your opponent's plans, that's already pretty cool. Now, very often they will try to defend this bishop, again, to avoid doubling their pawns. They'll play something like rook c1 or queen c2, doesn't matter. Now, how do you develop this queenside knight? You do not want to put it right here in most cases because it will block your own bishop. Therefore, instead of moving it here, you first move the d pawn forward and then develop your knight to d7. Now you have this very nice harmonious setup that you're aiming for. Your bishop is still very active along this diagonal. Your knight is extremely good on this central square, putting pressure down here. Your other knight is just controlling the situation, ready to be moved to f6 if necessary. Plus, you have very nice central control, which makes it hard for your opponent to go forward and to attack you anyhow. At this point, it's very common for your opponents to be annoyed by your centralized knight, and they try to trade it off by moving their knight, kind of offering you to trade. But of course, there is no need for you to do anything. Your knight is very well protected. You don't have to do anything about that. Moreover, you can take advantage of him getting his knight out of the square back there to d2, because from here, the knight used to control these two squares, but not any longer. And it also means that his king is now left totally undefended. There are no pieces around him in this area, which makes it easier for you to approach the king and to start attacking it. Very often you just want to bring your queen to one of these two squares and then to launch your attack. And you can do that right away by going, let's say, queen h4, throwing your queen out of there. Because good things come to those who bait. You know, you're kind of provoking him to play g3, and if he does that, there are a number of interesting opportunities for you. By the way, if he doesn't, you know, you still have a very strong attack. You'll just lift your rook somewhere here or here, and it's also going to be problematic for white to defend. But let's say after queen h4, he does play pawn g3, trying to kick your queen out. You have a move such as knight to g5. A very interesting idea. At first, it looks like some dumb move that you played, maybe pre-moved, overlooking the fact that your queen is hanging, and your opponent is of course happy about that, but you're also reasonably happy because you've just helped one more person to attain a title of Blundermaster from Blunderville. Another fun fact about this position is that a couple games actually reached this point, and the most played move was f4, which ironically does not change anything because you're still playing knight h3 with a checkmate. Now, of course, you may be wondering, like, Igor, this is just in this particular position. In some other position, it might not work. That is true. But if, let's say, that knight g5 tactic does not work, all right, what would you do then? Well, then you've got a very simple move, just queen to h3. You infiltrate, You take aim at all these weaknesses as well as his king. Let's not forget about our sniper bishop. And now your threat is very simple: to trade off your knight one way or the other, and then to play queen g2 checkmate, supported by your bishop, right? So that is a threat. If he tries to block it with bishop f3, then you've got one more very standard attacking idea, the rook lift. You play rook f6, aim into rook h6, and capture this pawn. For that reason, he's got no time for anything else. He's got no time to take on e4, because you're going for this checkmate. If he tries to kick off your queen once again, then there's another unpleasant surprise. This time it's knight takes d2. You attack the attacker. Literally, he tried to attack you, but now you say, you know what? I'm going to capture you. Of course, he cannot allow that. And if he captures your queen, then it is another nightmare. Knight 3 check. Once the king moves anywhere, there's knight takes d4. Your sniper bishop works again, checking the king, and once the king moves, you finally take on c2, and you end up with significant material advantage. For example, if we continue the line and just keep taking everything, at the end of the day, you're up a knight and a pawn in a winning endgame. And here's a little tactical warm-up for you. It is black to play, and your task is to find a winning continuation for black. And if you can, please write it down in comments below. If you cannot find it, no problem, it's a pretty advanced position, then just look at the comments, somebody will definitely point it out. Here are a couple other questions you guys have asked me about. What if they don't develop this knight and therefore you cannot pin it by your bishop? Let's say they develop the other knight first. You can wait a little bit. You can also make this move, which is useful. You can also wait more by playing b6 and bishop b7, playing other moves which are part of your plan anyway, and at some point you will play bishop b4 no matter what. Whether there's a knight there or not, you're gonna play bishop b4 and will trade off your bishop against his knight or bishop, whatever he uses to cover his king. Now, at some point, in most cases, they will play knight c3 because that is the most played move by 4, and then you play bishop b4, pinning the knight. The other question you may have is, how about that developing their bishop right here, pinning your knight, so that you can't go to e4 anymore? Is that an issue? Not really. I'll show you in a moment. First off, you trade on c3, so that you eliminate the defender of this square, plus you also arrange these doubled weak pawns for your opponent. And then you continue with your usual plan. You just develop your pieces as usual, and at some point, I really love the move queen e8. In this game, the player first played d6, that is okay, and then played queen e8. It is a multi-purpose move. First off, you step away from this pin, therefore your knight is now free to go and free to land on e4. Secondly, you make another useful idea. You're going to reroute your queen to the king side, where it's going to attack his king and also support this pressure from your bishop. Right now, white already needs to be very careful. If they play some move like this, that's going to be a rookie error. Because now already you can pull off this little tactic, trade off the knight, and after queen to g6, the bishop is now pinned down to the king, and they're going to lose the bishop. In the actual game, white noticed the danger and traded on f6, which is a correct move, because otherwise, indeed, you can see that his own bishop might be in danger. Plus, your knight was ready to go forward to e4, and therefore bishop f6 makes sense. But now he's still left with the same problems. Your bishop is putting pressure. White tried to block that, offering you an exchange of pawns, but we know that to take is a mistake, one of the classical rules of Igor Nation. Therefore, black just adhered to his own plan, simply brought the queen right there, and after rook e1, continued his development. Now rook g6 is coming with all these attacks. White tried to do something to counter-strike, but black does not even have to react. Rook g6 still pins this pawn. Now black is ready for taking on f3 with one of his pieces. White tried to run away, but now rook takes g2, a final little rook sacrifice, which again shows you this common pattern. The bishop is so strong that it always makes sense to utilize that one way or the other, and in this case, black is just winning the game. And now we're getting to supposedly the final boss, the London system. After that, you play knight f6, your usual move, and then, once they expose their nasty intentions, we see that they're about to build this pyramid of pawns, we change our plan. Because the downside of the London system is that we know exactly what your opponent is going to play. All these moves, we know them really, really well, and therefore will be prepared. You will play d6. Now, against the London system, your typical plan does not work as well, because with c3, you cannot develop your bishop right here. Of course, you can play the bishop here, but it's less active. Therefore, I prefer another approach, so the so-called London system, the Leningrad system with pawn to d6. Now, with this pawn is actually really annoying for white, because the bishop is now totally dull. It cannot go forward. It does not control anything across this diagonal. Plus, typically in the London system, with your pawn on d5, they have control of this e5 square, if your pawn were here, right? But not anymore. Now their knight does not have control of anything. And therefore, after knight f3, you just continue your development. Now we have a similar situation with the kingside bishop, which we previously had with the queenside bishop. The bishop is obstructed along this diagonal, therefore we develop it this way. And then after a couple more moves, you simply play knight c6, and after knight to d2, I find this position to be extremely satisfying, because it is a must-have item on any chess player's bucket list to demolish the London system. And now, as soon as your opponent is absolutely happy with putting out the perfect London system, that is the exact moment when he loses the game, because you've got the move pawn to e5. And this little tactical trick allows you to win the bishop. Here's the thing. The bishop is attacked. White cannot ignore this. If the bishop just retreats anywhere, the pawn is going to march forward with a double attack, and you're going to win one of those two pieces. Therefore, they can't do that. And if they trade on e5, the problem for white is now you also open up the second discovered attack of this light square bishop. And therefore, he cannot defend both his bishops simultaneously. Let's say he takes on e5. Now you just trade. Don't take here right away because temporarily knight defends it. Therefore, you trade. And then you play queen takes d3. And now you're up a bishop. You also do not let him castle. Have very active position, and hopefully you're gonna win from here. Of course, if you can't win even after that, then I'd really recommend that you check out this free masterclass that's gonna help you be more consistent and blunder less. Finally, of course, let me know if you have any other questions and if you want me to record continuation about the Dutch defense, and I'll be happy to do that. Talk to you soon.